second YouTube video. This one, I'm going to be explaining Lorenzo's second hospital stay and letting you see Lorenzo now, because he was not the Lorenzo that he was before, but we're getting him back slowly but surely.
Mama.
You want to see everybody? Okay. Say hi, everybody.
Honey.
Still very happy. Still very Lorenzo. Say, this is me.
Me.
Me. Say, this is my feeding tube and my trach. Say, this is how I breathe. So hello again, everybody. Gotta get comfortable for this YouTube video. I'm paying attention to Lorenzo because, sorry, all his information is on that wall that I just showed you. So this will not be a long story short type of moment. It just won't. May 20th, I took Lorenzo. And that noise will probably be interrupting us for the next couple weeks. I'll be right back. Why are you throwing toys? We started out here on May 20th. I took him to urgent care when I picked him up from his aunt's house, and I actually met her at a McDonald's to pick him up, and he was asleep in the McDonald's play area. Everybody knows Lorenzo's full of energy all the time. Yes. Oh, Bubba. Everybody knows Lorenzo's full of energy all the time, so I knew something had to be like drastically wrong at that point. So when I went to pick him up, he started crying his eyes out, and it scared me because I thought maybe he hurt himself, and when I picked him up that I had hurt him. And he jumped right back up on that bench and went back to sleep, and I was like, okay, no, something's really wrong. So the first time I was so worried about picking him up that I didn't feel it, but the second time I went back to pick him up, he was on fire. Yes. Gecko won't come out. There you go. He was on fire. So I put him in the car seat so fast, and I took him to urgent care, and they said he tested positive for strep. We sent this prescription to your pharmacy. He should be better in a couple days. Keep clothes off of him because his fever is like 105.2. And I never knew anybody with a fever that high. Nothing. Like, I mean, 102, okay, but like, I had never heard or seen anybody with a fever 105 or over. So I was panicking. So I took him home, and you know, they said he would get better in a couple days, and he had strep before, so I knew that like he would be okay. So took him home. He still wasn't getting better, so the next day I brought him to the actual hospital ER, not urgent care. I brought him to the hospital ER, and they said, okay, we're gonna skip the 10 days of antibiotics. We're gonna give him a penicillin shot. That should make him better in about 48 hours. Just make sure he's drinking liquids. And I said, okay. And at that time, he was still drinking liquids. So the doctors weren't worried. So that next morning, and they told me to keep rotating, you know, Benadryl and Tylenol for the fever. Well, the next morning, his fever still wasn't breaking. It was still a good, like, 104.8. And he was throwing up a lot. So I said, no, we're going back. That was May 22nd. We woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. We went into the ER, and he was absolutely miserable. Every time you would move him, touch him, turn his head, he would throw up. And there came a point where he was throwing up so much that it ended up being dry blood because there was nothing else in his stomach. And that's when I started to panic. I was like, okay, I don't even know if I'm walking out of here with my son. Like, I don't know what is happening. Because he was perfect, he was perfectly healthy before, you know, catching this fever and this whatever he had. So They did all kinds of tests in the ER. He wouldn't drink anything. They tried to give him nausea meds. Those didn't work. They tried, giving him the IV to hydrate him because they said he was severely dehydrated on top of whatever else was happening. So I was like, okay, that wasn't working. So they did X-rays and CTs, and there was nothing showing up on anything. So they put us up on a floor. This part is long story short. We were up on a floor for about a week and a half, and nothing was happening. They just kept giving him the same meds over and over to relax him and blah, blah, blah. Nothing was working. So we finally started hearing, and the whole time we were on the 5th floor, he was throwing up. So there was nothing that they could really do to stop it because they didn't know what was going on. And no medicine was working. So, I lose my train of thought all the time. So one night I was there and I never went home, by the way. One night I was there alone for just a couple of hours and I started, hey, where are you going? I had to pick up my child's toys from the floor. Hey. Lorenzo throwing stuff is his natural habitat. So, hey. Oh, missed me. So the meds weren't working. One night I noticed that his breathing was really, really loud. Like a freight train. Like I could physically hear him be like that. So, and this whole time he's been throwing up, and he wouldn't really let us clean out his mouth. But, we tried our best to get in there with like sponges to clean out his mouth and everything. And he started getting sores on his mouth, like he couldn't eat or drink. And then you could tell that whenever he did eat or drink, it physically hurt him. So then he didn't want anything. So they yes, love. I know. So they ended up rushing him down to ICU. And that's where they did, an ear, nose, and throat doctor came down and looked at his throat. And she said that the whole back of his throat down was covered in pus. And that was from the throwing up. And none of the doctors or nurses, saying, that we needed to clean out his mouth. What are you doing? So, they ended up putting him in a breathing tube for 3 days, sedating him completely. So for 3 days, we just watched him lay there with like 3 tubes in his mouth. And that was the scariest time, I believe. One of the scariest times, because we had 2 other scary times. But that one was the first one, and then, they gave his body time to rest while he was under sedation. So once they took the breathing tubes out, and he started breathing okay on his own with some oxygen, they took him back up to the normal floor and said, with the medicine, because they found staph infection in his throat when they tested the pus. And the staph infection you can get from the acid. When you throw up, you bring up acid as well from your belly. So that's what caused staph in the throat. So they put him back in a normal room, and he still wasn't doing good. They put him back up on the 5th floor. He was there for 2 days, and I said, there's something wrong. He's not comfortable. He's not breathing right. There's something going on. And he wasn't talking to us either. At this point, he hadn't talked to us for over a week. So I was like, something's really wrong. You need me? So at this point, they called doctors from ICU to come up to the floor and see him and check him out. And when she came up there, I said, I don't know what you're planning after seeing him. I said, but I'm not staying in this room another night. He needs to be down at ICU because he needs extra help. He needs help that they can't give him on this floor with regular meds. He needs more intensive care, obviously, ICU. So they rushed him back down there, and his breathing was just terrible. So the ear, nose, and throat doctor came that next morning, the same one who checked his throat before. And I was kind of asleep, but then when I woke up, it was a scary scene for us because, no, sir. Because when we woke up, I saw like 3 nurses on each side of his bed and then 2 doctors. And I was like, oh, okay, what's going on? So, you okay? I heard his ear, nose, and throat doctor say, the only way to fix this is with a trach. And I had heard of trachs and seen a trach, but I had never thought it would be on like my son, you know? Hey, back. So they took him to get a trach later that day. And the whole time in the hospital, they don't know what's really going on. They don't know what caused him to throw up. They don't know what caused him to throw up blood. They don't know what caused him to get, well, they do know what caused him to get the staph, but they say they don't. And then, hey, you're cutting it close, mister. Scoot back. Scoot back, please. Scoot back. He's cutting it close. Say hi. So, say hi, yo. Here. So I had to pause to adjust him, but I'm back with a jacket because it's freezing in here all the time. So that we took him, she did the trach later that day because she said out of nowhere that his vocal cords had stopped working, and that's a major way that you move air. So, what? So, they had to do the trach to help him breathe at this point. In your bed. So I'm wearing a whole new outfit because it is a completely different day. The day I started filming this video, I started getting really busy and I just couldn't finish. I guess I'm gonna pick up where I left off. He got the trach because he wasn't moving air through his vocal cords, and this is, you know, how he's gonna breathe from now on. They're gonna give his vocal cords a year to start working again, and if they don't, he's gonna have it forever. But I mean, we're hoping that they'll start working again because it was pretty much out of nowhere that his vocal cords stopped. So after that, you know, they did the surgery, and that exact same night, the doctor in the ICU came and woke us up and said that they did an x-ray on his chest because he had pneumonia and he was on antibiotics and stuff, and they were basically like pulling fluid from his lungs, but air ended up getting between his rib cage and his lungs and separating. So they ended up doing another surgery. It was in his room, but it was still technically a surgery, I guess, but they put a tube right in here, and they had it stitched across so that it would move. It was going right into his side. And through all of this, he stopped urinating on his own. He stopped having bowel movements on his own. So they were having to use a catheter on him every 4 hours to get him to go to the restroom. And sometimes during the hospital stay, he would go 2 weeks without having a bowel movement, and his stomach would get like big and round. And the only thing I can really compare it to, not to even be funny about this story at all, but Buddha, like his tummy would just inflate and get so hard and round, and then that would cause him to throw up more because of the pressure that it puts on, like right here under your chest, and it was just a big mess. He only had the tube in his lungs for 4 days because they got all the air out. They took x-rays of his lungs for, you know, every day until the pneumonia was gone. I mean, not really what else, there was a lot. After that, he ended up getting physical therapy and occupational therapy. Um, because he had lost all energy at that point in time. It had been 1 month and a half that he hadn't gone out of bed or moved or anything like that, since he was admitted to the hospital. So after that, the tube came out of his side, the pneumonia cleared up. They moved him to the room across from the room that he was in, just because it was more private. It had a closed door. The room that he had been in this entire time before in the ICU just had a curtain. At this point, they still didn't know what was going on, so they were looking at maybe a neurological standpoint, like maybe it was like his nerve cells and things like that. But they sent a lot of tests over to a clinic that took like 2 or 3 weeks to come back with the results, but they were all negative. So basically, to this day, we have no answers at all. The floor that we're on right now is a trach training floor where they teach us how to take care of his trach when we go home. For weeks after even we got on this floor, he had to be cathed. At one point, at one point, every hole that you have in your body besides these two, he had a tube coming out of. He had a feeding tube here, another tube here that was sucking all the bile and stuff out of his tummy, because if they didn't have the tube sucking it out, he would be throwing it up every 20 minutes. And he did that for over a month. They had that tube just sucking bile out because he couldn't even handle the own bile in his tummy. He was just constantly throwing up. So at one point, feeding tube, bile tube, tube in his side to take the air out. They had the catheter in, and then they actually had a tube going up his rectum to see if that would consistently make him poop, which it didn't. So that was pointless. We've been on this trach training floor for it's been about a month, a good month, maybe a little bit over that. But our total hospital stay has been 2.5 weeks. I would have to say it's been a struggle. We've gotten past a lot of meds, a lot of scary nights, a lot of nights I couldn't sleep and I just walked around, a lot of nights I couldn't sleep and I just watched him sleep. It took me a good month and a half until after he was admitted here to go home and get a good night's sleep, which my mom convinced me of. And that was when he was in ICU the first time, only because there was a nurse watching him 24/7. He had his own nurse, so he was who she had to keep an eye on. So I knew he was being taken care of, and the nurses have your numbers and stuff like that. So I still didn't sleep very good because I was away from him. But in our total hospital stay, I went home twice. Once the first time he was in the ICU, and then once the second time. And of course I was miserable both times, but we've made it this far, and he's constantly getting better. He will have to be going home with the trach and the feeding tube because his tummy's taking a while to adjust to everything that it's been through for these couple months. So he's going to have the feeding tube for a little while until his body is used to solid foods, and then that can come out, and then hopefully the trach will come out. Hopefully it is hopefully it is temporary. That's what we're praying for. That's what we're hoping for. So, and prayers, they're working for us right now. So that is probably the short version of a very long 2.5 months. It was not how I pictured the summer off with my son, but at this point I am happy to say that he's on the road to recovery and back to full health. So all I can do, or all we can do, is just continue to pray that he gets better and better every day. But thank you for watching, whoever watched. I figured that maybe after my GBS video that I would go ahead and do this video just to anybody who's interested, and maybe another video will come soon.